Today we're here with Adriano Del Monte. Now he is a football broadcaster, pretty much covers European leagues and Serie A, and he happens to find himself right now in the heart of the coronavirus crisis in Italy. First off, Adriano, talk to us about how you are right now.
Thank you for having me. Well, how I am right now, we're 20 days into the lockdown here in Lombardia, the region in which Milan is based, and obviously a very sad and bizarre experience given the fact that, well, the warning signs were there. We saw what had happened in a couple of other places in the world, but unfortunately 3 weeks on and no real light at the end of the tunnel at this point. Obviously very sad from all walks of life, given the fact that I do work and cover football. That's the last thing from my mind at the present time. But what you've seen in the news with the numbers and everything going around here at this point in time, no sign of it easing at this point.
Now, you said 20 days in lockdown. What does that mean? Country to country, it's been varying about just how open the government is to letting people walk around or walk their dogs. What is Lombardia doing right now?
Well, Lombardia right now, as well as the entire country of Italy, for 2 weeks, so for 14 of our 20 days, it's effectively been a red zone, which essentially means everything is closed with exception to pharmacies and supermarkets, meaning a couple of hours ago was only the third time that I've actually left my apartment in these 3 weeks just to pick up a few groceries and get some food. So essentially at this point, I live very centrally in the heart of Milan, right amongst cafes, bars and restaurants, and normally thousands of people here on my doorstep on a daily basis. But at the moment, it's a ghost town out there, unfortunately. And as I said, we're unsure as to what the future holds. But at this point, everyone really uniting in Italy, which has been beautiful to see, coming together and hopefully supporting the cause that we come out the other side sooner for it.
Absolutely. And is there any glimmer of hope? You mentioned there is no really light at the end of the tunnel, but have the cases been slowing down? What is sort of the energy of the people in Italy? Is there still hope that this will end soon?
Italian people generally always have hope, very positive, very optimistic people. And that certainly has remained in this very difficult time. I'm sure you've seen scenes from Italy, people coming together, singing from their balconies and really uniting on that front, which has been beautiful. But with regards to the numbers and the data that we have access to, the short answer at this point is no. There have been a few days where we've seen some downward trends, which may be positive, but the last 7 days we've had over 600 deaths every day, new cases, and it is at the moment really, as I said, no light at the end of the tunnel, but people still do remain optimistic. What this means going forward at the present time, April the 3rd, was supposed to be the initial end of the lockdown. That's only 1 week away. So we are anticipating that the leaders will officially extend that for at least a couple of weeks in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. And that also reflects back to football, back to Serie A, because there was talks initially it would come back in April. Now they're talking May 3rd, might even be too optimistic. But I want to start at the very beginning. When we first started seeing coronavirus affect Serie A, we mentioned we were both at the Rome-Lazio game where the first cases in Rome were starting to come up, but this Atalanta versus Valencia game seems to signal the beginning of the end of Serie A. Were you at that game? What has been talked about in Italy about that moment?
Well, I was supposed to be at that match, actually, covering it for another broadcaster, but, well, fortunately, in the end, there were semi-restrictions in place and some warnings suggesting perhaps don't attend that match. So I didn't in the end, and glad I did not. But yes, I'm sure you've seen the reports. They have been very consistent in recent days right around the world that Atalanta-Valencia clash was a catalyst. Now, we have to be careful. Obviously, 50,000 people coming together is not great, particularly at that point in time. However, it is also the weeks that followed. Now, keep in mind, that was the first leg of the round of 16 Champions League clash, which was mid-February. This went on for another 3 weeks across Bergamo, where Atalanta are based, across the north of Italy, and also in Spain. And it's obviously that carry-on whereby many people attended that fixture, but then went about living their daily lives as per normal for 3 weeks. And obviously that has escalated the entire situation. So it's very sad from a football perspective that, or the greatest night in Atalanta's history, the greatest tie in Atalanta's history has played some part in the escalation of these cases in Bergamo and right across Italy.
Absolutely. And it does reflect a lot back into the cities. Italy's soccer, I find, just defines every single city individually. And the same thing happens in North America with a lot of different sports. I'm curious because here in Canada, no one really took this seriously until the first NBA player got the virus, until the NBA shut down. Nobody believed that this was an actual threat. Now we've heard about Serie A players testing positive for coronavirus. We've heard Paolo Maldini, Daniel Maldini, Pezzella, Catrone, Dybala, these household names getting the virus. Has that made people realize how serious this is? Has that impacted Italy? Or is everyone just more focused on their families right now?
Look, it's a bit of both. Obviously, when high-profile figures contract the virus, fortunately, they're safe and well, according to all reports, despite contracting that virus. But obviously, it sets home that they're not superhuman. We are not superhuman. Everyone can potentially contract this thing. So it does set home a little stronger. However, I think at this point, as I said, Italy have really come together. Look, it's a country of 60 million people. Of course, there are still going to be some that, unfortunately, for whatever reason, still disregard the rules and restrictions. But again, the point being that Italy, when this hit us, particularly here in the north where there are the most cases, we didn't have too much data and information to go off. China, South Korea, and Iran before that were the countries that had really been dealing with the situation. So we felt we were very new to this. It's the other countries now around the world where it is becoming a little more significant, and they are ramping up their precautionary measures where we really are encouraging people, and I certainly have via social media, just act now, really be proactive now. Don't be reactive and await the same number of cases that we have here because, look, 20 days and no light at the end of the tunnel for me, as I said, you do not want to be in this position. It is not fun being locked in your apartment or your home, even with your loved ones, for this amount of time. So, yes, the Serie A players who have contracted it has sent, well, if we can say, a positive message in terms of respect the restrictions even more, because the likes of Dybala, one of the biggest names in the game globally, has contracted it, then so can we. But in the end, everyone's certainly looking after themselves and their families.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of talk as well for Serie A about different potential endings. You know, there was the talk of the playoffs bracket. There was talk of perhaps just canceling the season and restarting from zero next season. What do the fans in Italy want? Have you been able to talk to different people, different, executives or people that are involved in Serie A? What is the best case scenario that people can expect for Serie A?
Look, these are changing by the day. Of course, no one knows when, if this coronavirus situation will end this year. We're unsure as to what the future holds. But of course, like any business, like anything that is still functioning, Serie A are trying to put tentative plans in place to have a couple of options available. The latest reports are suggesting that they may look to an early June date to resume the competition and pack the final 12 rounds of fixtures into a 6 to 7 week period ending towards the end of July. The only issue there is, well, what happens with UEFA competitions? What happens with the Champions League? What happens with the Europa League? We know, of course, Euro 2020 has been postponed till next year. But look, at this point, I think that is I'm not going to say a logical solution because, again, we're unsure as to when this will end, when the lockdown will end. But at this point, I do feel that the best case scenario for Serie A is to resume football perhaps in late May, early June. There won't be any fans. There is absolutely no chance of that whatsoever. Experts here have come out and said maybe there won't be fans in stadiums for the remainder of 2020 in any sport. So that won't be an option. But I think in terms of potentially finishing the campaign, a June date to resume 12 rounds in 6 weeks, and that's the only option.
Has training resumed? Because there was a lot of talk of Napoli, Lazio, different teams wanting to get back out on the pitch. And then you had the Brescia and the Torinos that were completely opposed. Have any teams actually started training, or are all players on lockdown still?
All players on lockdown still. Cagliari were the other club that wanted to resume training as well. Look, it sends the wrong message first and foremost, but on top of that, even if the players, the squad members are all tested and are negative and are clear and healthy, you don't know who they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. There are staff. There are a number of people that make up a club. It is just not the squad, the 23 players in the squad. So this is a very dangerous one, and obviously there have been some clubs who have been strongly opposed against that. And take Juventus as a good example. 4 or 5 players have actually returned to their home countries. And the rule is once they return to Italy, 14 more days in quarantine. So training will not resume anytime soon. And in the case of those players, I don't feel that they will actually return to Italy until there is some clarity around when the league will actually resume.
Well, that was my next question, actually. Will there be an issue getting those players back into Italy now that they've stepped outside and non-essential travel isn't even allowed?
Well, yes, 2 weeks, as I said, will be the period in which they will need to quarantine once again. And obviously that could delay proceedings even further when we talk about a potential dates to resume the league. But again, first and foremost, there is no clarity as to when this will all end. And despite how important Serie A and football across the board is to Italy and all of Europe and the world, that is completely secondary at this point in time.
Absolutely. Now, Adriano, thank you for joining us. Before we let you go, I do want to ask you to give a message to our Canadian viewers as someone who is, of course, at the epicenter of this coronavirus pandemic. If you have any advice or anything that you could share with everybody back home.
I have plenty of advice. I've lived it for 20 days. But the simple message for me in this time more so than ever is take a leaf out of our book. Do not make the same mistakes that we made. And in doing so, really respect the restrictions that have been enforced. My message to my family and friends where I'm from in Australia has been simply treat this whole situation as if you have the illness as well, because you don't need to show symptoms to actually have the illness. But if you did know that you had the illness and you were a potential danger to your friends, your family, and all of your loved ones, you would definitely respect the measures that were in place. So look after yourself first and foremost, but of course look after each other, and hopefully we're back on the pitch playing some football and enjoying day-to-day life very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we wish you all the best. And of course, stay strong. 20 days have gone by, and who knows how much longer you'll be there. So continue to stay strong, and we'll definitely check in with you in the next coming weeks.
Thank you so much for having me.